I never made the video that was like, I nearly ended up in a lawsuit with X person, X show, but that would have done way better.
Oh, yeah.
I try not to think about how I'm being perceived.
Hey everyone, welcome to Game Changers, your backstage pass to innovators transforming Broadway. And oh my God, hey, today we're with Mickey Jo Boucher, i.e. Mickey Jo Theater.
Oh my God, hey, Katharine Quinn.
Oh my God, I'm so happy you're here.
Thrilled to be here.
I'm elated. Okay, for friends who don't know you, what do you do?
So I am a musical theatre YouTuber from the UK, but I make content talking about the West End, also talking about Broadway, occasionally talking about theatre worldwide. And predominantly on that platform, I identify as a theatre critic. Like the main thing I will do is go and see a show and then make a review video rather than a written review and talk about how I felt about it.
How did that come to be?
It's so interesting because I used to be a theatre blogger and I would write about things from when I was like 16. I went to go see Into the Woods at Regent's Park Open Air Theatre and I was like, oh, I'm seeing Wicked tomorrow, but like theatre is so much bigger than what I thought theatre was. And I discovered Sondheim and all of these things. And so I would write on a little blog that I would never share anywhere. So it was this secret thing for years. It probably still exists on the internet.
Or it's just like a journal, essentially?
Just me.
Wow.
Just me talking about that as a way to process and be like, try to understand, like, this production did this. And as I was discovering things and like, oh, these are like different choices. Because I had just discovered like the original Broadway Into the Woods. And then I went to see that one. I was like, this is creatively completely different. And so as my own way of coming to terms with that, I wrote about it and then did that for a whole bunch of other stuff. And at some point, I was doing a lot of community theatre as a performer, just an enthusiast, not trying to be a professional actor. And I was so enamored with the backstage vlogs that Broadway.com makes that I was like, I'll do that for my Amdram shows. And then locally, I'm going to get known for that. And people are going to want to cast me in the shows because I'm going to be the person who makes the videos.
Smart.
It was really around the time the world started ending and theatre went away for a little bit that I was like, I've got a lot more time. Let's do this theatre YouTuber thing. And a lot of other people stopped at that moment. And I became one of the few people doing it then. But even then, it wasn't criticism. I was emulating what I was seeing on other people's platform. I was like, what is fun YouTube theatre content? Like talking about Hamilton coming to Disney Plus and doing like, here are a bunch of lyrics that I hate and those kind of videos. And I was like, because no one is going to want to watch a video of me talking for more than 10 minutes about dramaturgy or reviewing. And then it must have been as theatres were reopening post-pandemic, late mid-pandemic, that I then got invited to go and see stuff. And the more I leaned into doing that on social media, people responded to it in a way that really surprised me. And it became the thing I was maybe most known for.
And it's your full-time job.
It is my full-time job. Even for a while there, while I was doing some of my biggest videos, I was still balancing doing that and teaching math in the daytime.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What?
That was the job. Yeah. And then it started to reach a point where my students found out and would just like mention something offhand during a lesson. I'd be like, oh, this is now a little bit of a problem. But also YouTube was becoming by itself more financially viable than the day job. And I was like, that may not be the same thing forever. And so for about 6 months, I did both really intensely and then made the jump to just doing YouTube and everything else that comes with that as well.
When did you go full-time?
January of 2023.
That's amazing. It's only growing.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a bit before on my channel, but the perception of you as theater critic as opposed to traditional print outlets or even online outlets. What was that like and what is it like now?
You know, it's so interesting because I could only ever speak to my preconceptions about this before. And I was like, I'm probably being paranoid. And I met a very nice and someone I really respect, a prestigious theatre critic in London at the Stage Debut Awards not too long ago, was introduced to them by a mutual friend. And they said, yes, the disruptor. And I was like, this sort of aligns with the way I thought that I was being perceived, but also the idea that that has ever been my intention is completely false and not something I want people to think, because I have the most respect for theatre criticism and for theatre critics. I am just so passionate about it, and whether that's writing, whether that's video, I love doing it on video. I also write things occasionally, and like I said, I did that for a really long time. There's a lot that doing it on video allows me to do. It's really the more privileged way to do it, because I can talk for 45 minutes about all of the different choices in Sunset Boulevard, and professional newspaper critics have a word count, and they have editors and all these things they have to go through, and don't give us a 3-star, we want you to do a 2 or a 4. And I get to choose what I go and see. I get to choose what I talk about. So there's an enormous freedom to it. I think at the same time, it's not a thriving medium. There's a lot of conversation about is print journalism just as an entire concept dying? Are people engaging with theatre reviews? And from my perspective, from where I sit among it all, I think people do engage very differently. I don't think I'm more important than the New York Times. I don't think I'm more read or watched than the New York Times. But I don't know to the extent that people, certainly dedicated people within the theatre community, go to the New York Times in a different way, and they take a different thing from it. And I'm also, it's my face talking, and so that feels more down to earth and more personal, perhaps. There is a place for different media within theatre criticism. I'm happy with where I sit among it. There are many people who have been very kind from that world, both in London and in New York, who have said very nice things. I also think that's not necessarily universally felt. Like I said, the disruptor. I still don't know what that means. I'm still figuring out what that means.
I feel you on that. Multiple things. One is you have the gift of, people are always like, well, you can't interpret tone as easily from written media as you can in a video. And I feel like that's another incredible privilege of doing video criticism, is you can perceive tone.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm so curious. You said New York critics have been kind as well?
A small handful. I've met very few. Just in the way they regard me, as I've been introduced by people before, and they said, this is Mickey Jo. He is a professional theatre critic. And just, that's not everyone's perspective. Not everyone sees it that way, because no one said to me, you get to do this. You get to call yourself this. I started doing it. I make an income doing theatre criticism. Ergo, I call myself a professional theatre critic. I didn't train in the same way. I don't have a degree that's tantamount to that. If someone publishes a book, they're a writer. That's how I feel about it.
My feeling, I have spoken to producers, namely British producers, who are like, Mickey Jo is the artist's critic. Like, you're held in very high regard by artists in general. However, I also know that you've had videos reported or asked to be removed because certain productions were not pleased with your words about them. So how do you balance your artistic integrity with the fear of being censored, essentially, in a way that a newspaper, you can't say, hey, newspaper, retract your entire review, you know? So how do you handle that?
It's a good question. It's really a minority of occasions where people have taken issue. I'm sure people have taken issue with things and just not told me. Very rarely it comes back to me. YouTube is so interesting as a platform because they have the facility, if someone has enough money / influence / determination, they can really just try and get something taken down without ever talking to you about it. Things can just disappear. I woke up one day and one video, bear in mind, this was not even a review. This was a video of me reading through the reviews of a different production that I had not seen, because
I didn't even realize that.
It was very not local to me. It disappeared. And there's a possibility where this was because they were just sweeping through and taking down everything with keywords because they were trying to get rid of like bootlegged footage. But I don't think that's what it was. And so that was an interesting 48 hours that was resolved very quickly because there was no justification. It was a video. It was a copyright claim, and it was a video of me just talking through and reading reviews. And it wasn't a copyright claim from any of those newspapers. It was from not even the production, from someone attached to the star of the production.
Was it put back up or no?
It came back.
Thank God.
It came back, and I thought, but it almost, I never made the video that was like, I nearly ended up in a lawsuit with X person, X show, but that would have done way better.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's crazy to me that people don't really think about that. YouTube is your primary platform. What is your relationship with short form platforms?
Increasingly very positive. I feel like I'm understanding how to get TikTok to work for me. It often feels like juggling where I can sustain multiple things. And YouTube is always the one I'm going to nurture because that's where I live. And then I'll have a week where it's like, oh, I'm keeping up with Instagram this week and doing really well and like reels every day and interviews because I have so much more footage than I ever end up sharing because there are now so many press events and shows. And if I wanted, I could clip every YouTube video for a load of different sound bites. The day I'm like, oh, I'm doing great on Instagram, I realize I've forgotten about TikTok for a week. And then I'll go over and do that. And I'll be like, should I be tweeting more or whatever else?
You use Twitter?
I only occasionally.
This is not
Yeah.
judgmental.
Yeah.
I'm always just like, I forget that it exists now.
Yeah.
You still find it useful in certain ways.
Anything where you can see what the conversation is about is useful to me in terms of knowing where to make the content because I can get very singularly focused about my own stuff. Like I'm seeing 3 shows this week, so I will be reviewing that one there. I'll be doing that one short form. That's the other good thing about short form is sometimes that I don't need to talk for 20 minutes about a particular show. And also it will get more eyes on it on Instagram or TikTok than it would if I put it up on YouTube if it's a show people don't know about. Yeah, sometimes I'll be very just like, this is the content I'm making this week and everyone will be talking about something. And there have been moments where my partner Erin and I have been sat watching Disney Plus and I've said, I looked at my friend like, wow, everyone's still talking about this. And I was like, wait, that's a video. Why am I not talking about it? And realize I have to go and do that and turn it around in a couple of hours. So it's useful to have a footing everywhere just to see what the conversation is. That's how I feel about it. The comment about being the artist's critic, that's lovely to hear. And that's something, a surprising amount of it doesn't always filter down to me. Like people will say, oh, I'm sure that you know you're being talked about. And I don't, because people don't always tell me these things. You get chances to run into people and they say nice things. And someone sent me a message the other day. There is a musical that I've reviewed previously, opening on Broadway, holding auditions in some capacity, and they said, I assume you know they're using your video and they're like they're telling people to go and watch your video to get a sense of the tone of the piece. And I was like, no.
That's wild.
But good to know.
Mincemeat?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I schedule content within an inch of its life and literally news will break and I will get on YouTube and see that you have already posted a video. How do you do that?
And I don't even feel like I'm as fast as I used to be. Like, there are a lot of creators doing things much more professionally than me in terms of the production process. Nothing I do is ever scripted. I just sit down and I start talking.
It's amazing.
Because I think it's more natural. And the one time I tried to script something, it was a video I felt really positively about. And I was working with the National Theatre and talking about 100 National Theatre live broadcasts and that whole platform. And then I tried to set it up on a prompter on a screen. I just felt the whole video is me, like my eyeliner is kind of in the camera, but also over there. And it just didn't feel natural. But I wanted it to be scripted because I wanted to make sure I was saying everything that I wanted to say. Yeah, so it's never scripted. It's just a fast turnaround. I do all of my own editing at this time, film it for, I always say to Erin, I'll be gone for 20 minutes. And then 45 minutes later, he's not surprised. I edit myself on double speed. I literally throw it up on YouTube. Every single video I post, I'm still like doing the little drop down, turning to public. Nothing is ever, I don't use the scheduling feature.
Wow.
I could for no good reason. For no good reason, Katharine. It's just, I'm very technologically
prompt.
Yeah, but also stuck in my ways of just like, this is what I do. And there were particular things that were happening last year in particular shows and news stories that would keep having developments. And then every time casting would get released or every time there would be something about it, people usually on Twitter would be tagging me saying like, I'm waiting here for the Mickey Jo Theatre. And I was like, well, people are waiting. So I need to do it quickly.
I love that. Speaking of how often, we're in New York City now, how often do you get recognized?
More here.
Interesting.
But I think because the theatre community here is so condensed, when you're in Midtown around those theatres, it happens more. And there's been 2 lovely box office staff this week. So we're going to pick up tickets and I'm about to say my name. And he says, I know who you are, which makes that whole process so much faster, by the way. And they say like, welcome back. We were very jet lagged once on a previous trip coming in. We went to go and see something. And the house manager of the theatre we walked into said, I didn't know you were coming back. Oh my gosh, lovely to see you. Had a lovely chat. They're now a friend. And turned. And then the usher who was scanning our tickets said, welcome back to New York.
That's so lovely.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, you briefly mentioned National Theatre live streaming. I'm curious, it feels as though London is doing that better than New York. Do you feel like you're observing that? Does there feel like there's a difference between like digital theater there versus here? Like, what do you observe?
We definitely have more of it. I mean, there are fewer obstacles.
Right.
I think, and power to the unions, and fantastic that Broadway has the unions, but it's often the answer to like, why isn't this as easy as it seemed like it would be from the outside? Why can't we just put a camera in the Broadway theatre and film everything? And that's not to say that it's easy or straightforward doing it in the UK either, but there's a reason so many things are going to London to be filmed or being filmed in London. I was at the filming of the SpongeBob SquarePants pro shot for Nickelodeon that they did in Plymouth. That production never happened in the UK. They just brought the cast over. They brought that production over, kind of semi-secretly filmed it.
Was that the Broadway cast?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wild. That's amazing. When folks invite you to shows, how do you distinguish this is a paid opportunity or this is a press opportunity, or I'm generating this versus the theater is generating this? How do you handle all of it?
That's a distinction that only ever really comes into play here, because what I am and who I am in the UK versus in New York is a little bit different.
Interesting. Tell me.
So they're never paid opportunities, but it's whether am I a critic here or am I a bit more of an influencer? Am I doing a full review of this, talking about the dramaturgical process, or am I just celebrating that this thing exists? Because there is room to do both, and different shows deserve both. Everything can and should be reviewed. I'm a big believer in that. If you are charging people admission, they have a right to
for criticism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there are many shows where I'm like, I just want to support this thing, because also art is hard.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's things I could say about this show, but also it just deserves more people to know about it first.
Thank you.
Yeah. And here, am I talking to the marketing team about being an influencer? Am I talking to the press team about being a critic? And I came here for the first time in March of last year. There were more occasions then when people would shunt me to the other person and say, oh, because you're YouTube, you're talking to this person. You're talking to social media.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know that social media are going to love the level of honesty that not that influencers aren't honest, but they try and do like
promotion,
positive, promotional, celebratory.
Get the word out.
Yeah. What do I like about this? Even if they didn't like if you liked this, you would like this. Some sort of a positive spin. So still occasionally I get moved between the two. It never goes the other way. Marketing and social never like send me back to press to be like, oh, if you're reviewing, you're going that way. But
are press teams now inviting you?
Yeah.
In New York?
Yeah.
As a critic?
Yeah. Yeah. Not all of not universally. It's the same thing. It's just a few years behind where I was in the UK. I'm steadily gaining ground with more of them and just building a relationship, because that's what it is as well. Because if they don't know who I am, then I don't expect that. In the UK as well, when I was talking to more of those press teams and trying to like find the roots into the industry legitimately, there was never expectation. I was like, I'm just going to let the work speak for itself and keep doing it. And eventually I will have enough to show people this is what I do. And this is what I want to come and do.
To me, it feels as though Broadway is a bit on fire, that, there's an adage that we're always 5 years behind. Some might argue a little more, that we increasingly have younger audiences, but we don't entirely know how to reach them. We are reliant on physical word of mouth between people speaking like this instead of necessarily in their phones. I guess my first question is, as compared to West End, that's also my belief, which you can also obviously be like, I actually don't view it that way. But I'm curious, if you are feeling that, what are the differences between Broadway and the West End in terms of keeping up with the times, maintaining younger audiences, and keeping theater alive?
It's so interesting because the grass is always a little bit greener.
Sure.
I probably have a slightly more positive perspective on a lot of things here, because there's a lot here that we don't have in London. And there are many ways in which we feel more behind. The way that media works here, the way that opening nights work here, the amount of different outlets doing coverage, we just don't have that to the same extent in the UK. And also, as a critic, the way people do engage with criticism, the way that the New York Times or whoever it may be means something here and has an impact, they do, but certainly not to the same extent in the UK. And it all comes back to ticket prices. ticket prices are higher here, even after the exchange rate, than they would be in London.
Right.
Also, I think tourists come to New York for Broadway and for theatre, and many of them not with a particular show in mind. They will come and see a Broadway show, and then they will decide what that is after the fact. Some people do that in London for theatre. Theatre people certainly do that in London, but a lot of people go to London for the palace and for the royalty and for the history and for everything else. And the theatre is a component of that. It's not the same kind of a draw. So people will arrive, land in New York, and be like, what won the Tony? What does the New York Times look like? And because tickets are expensive, they really have to pay attention to those things. And they want some sense of quality before they shell out that much money for a ticket. I've moved away from the question you were initially asking. Let me work my way back to it. And Broadway being behind. And for sure, in terms of social media, and I still come up against things, and I still hear anecdotally about marketing meetings where the way that spend is allocated because, and I'm sure that you have insight into this as well, because things have always been done a certain way, because like, oh, this is what has always worked for us and we'll reach those people. And they don't realize that there are newer ways, better ways, easier ways, more efficient ways. You can spend less and you can reach more. Even within the last year, we're seeing a lot of change in terms of the marketing that's being done, in terms of the work that you're doing, in terms of the work that other people are doing as well. I think it's moving forwards, but definitely, like you said, we're still lingering in the past.
Room to grow.
In some ways.
Thank you. That's very generous to be included in all of that. Is that also true in the West End? They are on the West End? What do you say?
In the West End, people
in
feel very
West
strongly
End
about this.
On Broadway.
On Broadway, because Broadway is a street and the West End is a district.
Even though most shows aren't on Broadway.
Exactly.
We are on Broadway and we're in the West End. I got it right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Is that also true in the West End? A, that the house is on fire, and B, that we're seeing improvement over the last year?
We're definitely seeing improvement over the last year. I would like to think I've played a small part in that.
That's amazing. Of course you have.
I don't want to toot my own horn, but there's a lot of... We have many, many theatre bloggers in the West End. I don't think the Broadway ecosystem can sustain that, really, because a lot of those theatre bloggers, like I did, before you get to a point where you are getting allocated press tickets, you are buying tickets and trying to see as much as possible, and that is financially challenging to do here. I think you have to be in a very privileged position to even be able to do that. To get started as a theatre blogger here, I don't know that I would have been able to. We have more theatre influencers spinning off of that. It's interesting. There are more theatre influencers here who make sort of out-of-the-box creative content, and in London it's very review-focused from everyone. And there's a lot of people making really great content who I think feel tethered to doing reviews who don't necessarily have to. I think not everyone needs to like
be a critic.
If I'm going to this show, it's to do a star rating and it's to say.
But you've clearly established a standard or a norm, a path. Sort of like you were saying on YouTube, where initially you would see other people's YouTube content and be like, this is the thing I must be doing. And if you are the mold that a lot of newer creators in London are trying to emulate, it makes sense that they're like, well, Mickey Jo makes reviews, so I guess my content is making theater reviews.
Maybe. I am never on the side of a building. And that's not why I do any of this. Like, to hear lovely feedback from performers, creatives, writers, and also audiences, which is my favorite thing. When someone says, I wouldn't have seen this, you connected me to this, and I loved it.
Ditto.
That's
the best praise in the world.
The biggest delight. Or people doing entire trips. People now come to New York and say like,
I saw this because of you.
Yeah. Or just I planned a trip here because I watched your vlog content on the streets of Manhattan and it looked so amazing and I had to come and experience it. Mickey Jo Theatre, I think, will never look professional enough to put on the side of a building. If I had a different
moniker,
something like that, then I think maybe. But again, not the reason why I do reviews.
Most things are live and moving digitally. You are digital first and now moving also into live performance. So can you speak a little bit about your newest endeavors?
Yes, this has been a real joy to do. I now have a monthly live show residency at the Phoenix Arts Club in London. We're right beneath Stranger Things, The First Shadow.
Amazing.
It's an iconic London cabaret staple, and the venue approached me right at the end of last year, I think, to say if you ever wanted to do something like a podcast taping, something quite traditional. And simultaneously, my brain went, I want to do something bigger than that. I know exactly what I want it to be. I want it to be a cabaret show, and I will sing a little bit.
Yes.
But I will bring on very talented performers and also platform British musical theatre composers who need and deserve a platform.
Brilliant.
To come and showcase their work, and also everything else that can go on to be in the future. Just what that platform can be. But at the same time, I was also terrified about doing it, about doing something in this live form. Like, what will people say? Like,
it's vulnerable.
Yeah. And the idea that I was doing it to try and become a performer, or to try and like, to make it so much about myself. And the poster is a picture of my face, and it's Mickey Jo Theatre Live. And it's a lot of me, but it's finding a way of letting it be about other people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something we now do.
That's amazing.
Once a month, basically. And also it's live streamed.
How can we live stream it?
It's all on the Phoenix Arts Club website on the booking page for that show. There are in-person tickets and also live stream tickets. And people watch from New York. People watch from Australia and wake up
incredible
at the crack of dawn.
Have you seen theater in Australia?
I've never been to Australia.
We should go on a trip.
I'm determined.
Me too.
2025. That's one of my goals.
Great.
Is Australia. That's been the other really lovely door opened because of YouTube and because of everything, and because of doing it full time and getting to decide, like, this is
your priority right now.
Yeah, I get to travel more, which means coming here a lot. We did this 2-week trip in March of 2020 to 2023, which we were calling Trip of a Lifetime. Who knows when we'll be back? And then October happened, and then January happened, and then April, and then July, and now the following October, November, back again, trying to see everything, because more than half of the viewers that I get on YouTube as a platform are US-based.
That's amazing. Was that always the case?
It became the case, but it was already the case before we came to New York for the first time.
Wow. That's amazing.
I think because there is a stronger sense of theatre community here. People, you can spend time in Midtown Manhattan, you can go to a bar afterwards, and you can hear people talking about the show that they just saw. And there's so many logistical things that play into that, and it's because New York stays open later and London is the city that sleeps. And so just finding somewhere to go and talk about a show after a show closes is a challenge. So instead you hear people having those conversations on the train journey home. For whatever reason, there is a community in New York theatre, and so for me to be making a YouTube video, reading the reviews of something, that's something they are more used to engaging with and more interested by. And the demographic is also fascinating because it's not just young people, because it's social media. There's people leaving comments with fascinating history of, I saw the original production of Hello Dolly, I saw this, and sending me the most incredible emails. Truly everyone, all sorts of people, and industry professionals and casual theatre goers and people who are just discovering it and don't really know. I mean, I still put disclaimers in all these reviews. I just made a review of Romeo and Juliet, and I was like, do we all know Romeo and Juliet at this point?
Spoiler alert.
I'll do like a little bit of context. Yeah.
As we wrap up, rapid fire. Are you ready? The first one is actually not a very easy one to rapid fire, so apologies in advance. If you could change one thing about the current theater industry, what would it be?
Oh my God. Oh my God. I think I will always advocate for new musical theatre writers. That's all. But then also I want to talk about accessibility. There's too many things. There's too many things.
Accessibility and championing new writers are good answers. That was very quick. West End or Broadway?
Broadway is so special. I don't know if I'm ever happier than sat in an orchestra seat with a playbill in my hand about to see a Broadway show. But the West End still feels like home. That's a non-answer to that
Would you ever
question.
contemplate a move?
People keep commenting on things and saying, you're definitely going to move to New York. If it was just New York, and there's a lot of other things in terms of the US and the political landscape and everything. I've never cared much for travel, which is, I feel like a terrible thing to say because everyone's always like, broaden your horizons and see the world. And I've never been interested in doing that necessarily unless it's for theatre. And now getting to travel, I got to go to Brazil to go and see Brazilian non-replica Wicked, and that was extraordinary.
I lived for that content.
Yeah, we get to go to Paris, we get to go to Germany, hoping to go to Australia. Every time I get to go to a new place to go and see theatre there, that's the most thrilling thing. And coming to New York, it's the only time that I've ever thought like I could see it. At this time, it's not something I'm working towards. It's not in the plan. And it's also, I mean, it's also incredibly fast-paced, and it takes a very specific type of person to be able to live and work in New York.
That is a fact. Most overrated musical of all time?
Oh my gosh. Most overrated musical of all time? We were talking about one before this started, but I don't think that's of all time. That's just...
Currently.
That's currently happening right now because I didn't care for it.
We'll let you guess what that is.
Of all time? Of all time? Oh, things are playing on my mind, but then that's not kind to those things. You know what? This again is a non-answer. I don't have strong negative feelings to many shows because I've seen so many things get fixed. And there's been so many historic
Cats, for
problem
instance.
shows. And I was a Cats apologist. I have always loved, not the film, I have always loved original Cats. I grew up, that was probably the first theatre I ever saw, was the Cats VHS and the Joseph VHS.
Yeah.
I have a lot of love enduringly for those shows because I found them in a place of nostalgia.
Did you see the Jellicle Ball?
Yeah.
Did you love?
Wonderful.
It's incredible.
Great, incredible.
I've never enjoyed Cats, and I am obsessed.
Yeah.
Like, I need it to come back.
Yeah. So there are overrated productions, but I think everything can be fixed and saved. But I'm going to walk out of here and I'm going to go, oh no, that's completely overrated. And I should have said,
text me.
I'm going to text you in about an hour and be like, that's the most overrated music.
Dream show you'd love to review on opening night. It could be something that's actually coming, or it could be like, I want this to happen and I want to review it.
It's probably anything a Sondheim.
We're due for a good night music.
We are. On both sides of the Atlantic, we're due for a good night music.
We're due for a good Follies here. Y'all had one.
Yeah. I have dream venues as well because it may look like every door is open to me in London and in New York, and that's not the case. There are still places that I'm just building the relationship, and it's not indifference from them and it's not hesitation from them in 99% of cases. But there are still a couple places where I just don't go there as much, or I don't ask about it soon enough, or whatever it may be. And I'm like, no, I'd like to do the awards coverage as well. That's the thing, because that's a frontier I still haven't quite reached.
That's shocking to me.
It's hard because those awards days in both places, I feel, are the one day a year when suddenly all of these other outlets care about the theatre. The people working on them, and fair enough, are inundated with all of these requests from these massive TV, online,
huge outlets,
print outlets.
Yeah.
I love being there anyway because we spend the whole year working in the theatre industry, talking about the theatre industry, and it feels like the end of year party.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I love it. Favorite theatre snack?
Favorite theatre snack? I never get ice creams, and that's
I know.
That's our thing
cute.
in London. I never do it. I don't think I eat at the theatre in general. There's some that are doing mochi now, and I like the mochi, but generally it's a large glass of wine. It's my favorite theatre
I love
snack.
that. I love it. Favorite theatre superstition? One that you find charming.
I'm very resistant to I'll say Macbeth wherever.
Yeah. Oh,
and
I don't.
I'm terrible for it because I also whistle.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, just without thinking about it. I don't go into a theatre and like
start whistling
and like start saying it and whistling. I do it, and we're very haunted in London.
We're
as
also
well,
deeply haunted here.
allegedly. Oh well, then
The Belasco.
Yeah.
The Haunted.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, show you've reviewed the most times, or maybe seen the most times?
Show I've seen the most times is Six because it's very easy to go back to, and it becomes more about a lineup and going back to see different people. I've also seen it in 4 different countries.
Wow.
I think I've seen it in 4 different countries. I've seen Wicked on 3 continents.
That's sick.
And I'm trying to collect them all, but someone needs to do an Antarctic production.
With the penguins.
For that to happen. With the penguins. Yeah. Site-specific, immersive.
Do you have a pre-show ritual?
I will clean my glasses moments before every show begins. I will have a little glasses wipe, and I will clean my glasses, and that's usually the only thing. I don't take notes either. I think I might start though.
Yeah, that's very impressive.
I have a really good memory.
Wow.
And so I can pick up on specific details and pull those back without making, because I like to be in it the whole time and I like to be engaged, and you can't see what you're writing anyway. But I've started to think recently, as I get older, I'm going to have to start making more notes.
Best understudy performance you've seen?
So many. Oh my gosh, so many. And we were just talking about Six, so that's on my mind there because that's a great show where they get to truly bring themselves to it, and so it's completely different depending on who you're seeing. But then some other really remarkable ones as well. Oh no, I need more time.
You can pick one of. Is there anyone that's just like top of mind?
Do you know, this is a recent one. There's a performer named Ali Daniel who is the second cover, I think, for Hermes in the West End. And the way our cover sister works in London is that there is a tiering to it. And the first cover will go on with more preference. And it's only in the event of their indisposition as well that the second cover will then get to go on. And I was meant to be seeing something else that I had reviewed previously and happened to have tickets for later in its run that I didn't really want to see, but all of my friends were in town from New York. And I bailed on all of them to go and get a ticket to go and see Ali's first day playing Hermes in Hadestown. Wonderful and so special. And again, a completely different interpretation. This is the best thing, is the shows where they have the capacity for the understudies to bring their own individualism to it, because someone doing a version of someone else's performance is never going to be the most authentic or rewarding thing, either for them or for the audience.
Is there a show that you've changed your mind about?
There are a bunch of shows I've changed my mind about. While we're on the subject of Hadestown, I didn't get Hadestown the first time around. And I think there's so much pressure for critics to act like they get it all the time. And it's very scary.
The
very first time. And it's very scary to say, I don't think I got this. And so people end up saying, like, it didn't connect to me. They have to frame it as a failing of the show so as to still not pierce their own professionalism. And I will proudly say, I didn't get that. You have to really go into those lyrics in Hadestown to pull out, like, oh, we're talking about climate change. We're talking about colonialism. We're talking about so many different things. Just every time going back, new parts of it spoke to me in different ways. And so I really did have, I was never disliking of it. I was lukewarm on the show. And now I was like, oh no, that's really smart.
Same.
And now I feel more empowered to get why Buy a Return is it.
I love that. Did you ever gasp with the turnaround?
I don't think I was a gasper, no.
Yeah, me neither. It never surprises me. Have you said anything that you think will upset your followers?
Today?
Yeah.
Or like historically?
Today.
No, I don't think so.
You've been pretty diplomatic.
I try not to think about how I'm being perceived.
Good for you.
Because
tough.
I can get into a whole thing with that, and it's that's probably one of my biggest anxieties, is starting to worry about what is everyone thinking? What are the people, will they like this? Will they respond well to this? I can't stop and think about it.
You're the best. Thank you so much for joining. If folks want to follow you, where do they follow you?
I am at Mickey Jo Theatre all over the internet, predominantly on YouTube, but also my review videos and many of the other videos are now available on podcast platforms. So you can listen to me as you go about your day. You can also find me on Instagram, on the app formerly known as Twitter, on TikTok, on Threads, on LinkedIn for business inquiries. I'm at the Phoenix Arts Club roughly once a month doing Mickey Jo Theatre Live that you can watch in person in London or via live stream.
You're a star. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for joining us on Game Changers, and we'll see you next time.